The whole street saw Maura Fenwick running beside the wagon. Her adult daughter lay motionless beneath a damp cloth, one arm hanging weakly over the side as the wagon rattled through sagebrush wells. "Doctor!" Maura shouted. No answer. Someone called from the mercantile porch. Dr. Kittredge rode out to the Harlan place. Maura stopped dead. The Harlan place was miles away. Cecily didn't have miles. Her 22-year-old daughter had worked double shifts at the silver processing camp for nearly 3 weeks. That morning she'd staggered home pale, burning with fever, and insisting she only needed water. Then she'd collapsed. Hoofbeats sounded behind them. People moved aside. Orrin Vay rode into town on a dark bay horse, black hat low over his weathered face. Most people in Sagebrush Wells avoided asking Black Mesa's owner for favors. Maura didn't hesitate. She caught his bridle. "Take my daughter." Orrin looked toward Cecily. Maura's voice broke. "Please, let her live." He dismounted immediately, but instead of lifting Cecily onto his horse, he touched 2 fingers to her wrist, studied her breathing, then looked across the street. Ives Tolland, manager of the processing camp, stood beneath the hotel awning. Orrin's expression changed. "How many hours did she work this week?" Tolland stiffened. "This isn't the time. That's exactly why I'm asking." Maura snapped. "She needs help, not questions." Orrin turned toward her. "And she'll get it." He pointed toward a ranch hand. "Bring my covered wagon. Springs, water barrel, blankets." Then another. "Ride for Dr. Kittredge. Tell her Black Mesa. Don't stop." Within minutes, Cecily was carefully transferred beneath shade. Orrin climbed beside the driver. "You're coming too." Maura stared at him. "Where?" "Somewhere your daughter can recover without being charged for breathing." Black Mesa Ranch sat several miles beyond town, surrounded by dry hills and cottonwoods clinging stubbornly to the creek. Maura expected the Grand Ranch house. Orrin took them somewhere else. A low stone building stood behind the main residence beneath broad shade trees. Inside were 2 clean beds, shelves, a washstand, and a small kitchen. "What is this?" Maura asked. "My wife built it." Orrin's voice softened slightly. "Ranch injuries. Travelers caught too far from town." She thought nobody should have to make a 6-mile ride bleeding. He stopped there. Maura understood enough not to ask. Dr. Sabra Kittredge arrived before sunset. She examined Cecily for nearly an hour. When she finally stepped outside, Maura arose immediately. "Well, exhaustion, severe dehydration, heat strain, malnutrition." Maura's face crumpled. "Will she live?" "Yes." The word almost dropped Maura to her knees. Sabra continued firmly. "But she doesn't return to work next week. Or the week after. She rests." Orrin folded his arms. "She can do that here." Maura looked at him. "We can't pay." "I didn't ask. I don't take charity." Orrin met her eyes. "Then don't." He nodded toward the sleeping woman. "Call it giving your daughter what she needs." Cecily woke the following afternoon furious. "I have to go back." Maura nearly laughed from disbelief. "You nearly died. They owe me money." Orrin, standing near the doorway, stopped. "How much?" Cecily looked at him suspiciously. 6 weeks. "Why haven't they paid?" "They have." She reached weakly for her satchel. "Just not what they owe." Inside were pages filled with tiny, careful handwriting. "Hours. Rates. Deductions." Orrin pulled a chair closer. "May I?" Cecily handed him the pages. He read silently. "Housing charge. Meal charge. Equipment maintenance. Medical reserve. Transport fee." Orrin frowned. "You live with your mother." "Yes." "So why are they charging housing?" "They charge everyone." "Medical reserve?" Cecily gave a humorless laugh. "I've never seen a doctor they paid for." Orrin turned another page. "This isn't sloppy accounting." "No." Cecily looked toward him. "And it isn't only me." The room went quiet. "How many workers?" "Hundreds." If someone worked until they collapsed only to discover their wages had been quietly taken too, what would you do first? Walk away or expose everything? Tell me below. Orrin didn't ride into town demanding justice. That surprised Maura. Instead, he brought Cecily ledgers. Paper. Ink. A calculating slate. "If you're strong enough to work from bed." Cecily smiled faintly. "I am." "Then rebuild what you remember." For 3 days, she reconstructed payroll messages. Shift lengths. Recorded deductions. Payment dates. Quillenmar, another telegraph operator, quietly supplied copies of message logs. Patterns appeared. $1 missing here. 70 cents there. Small enough that exhausted workers rarely challenged them. Across hundreds of employees. A fortune. Mora stared at the totals. They've been stealing from people who can't afford to complain. Orrin nodded. That's why they chose them. She watched him carefully. You've seen this before. I've seen respectable men convince themselves theft becomes business when enough paper surrounds it. By the second week, Cecily could sit outside for several hours each morning. Mora, however, was becoming restless. I can't remain here eating your food. Orrin sighed. We've discussed this. You discussed it. I listened. That's generally how discussions work. Her eyes narrowed. Not where I come from. For the first time, he almost smiled. What do you want? Work. I don't need a laundress. I didn't offer laundry. She gestured toward the stone treatment house. This place has no proper inventory. Supplies disappear between shelves. 3 blankets need mending. The pantry isn't recorded. And when injured ranch hands arrive, nobody knows what's already available. Orrin stared at her. You noticed all that? I managed a boarding house for 11 years. She folded her arms. If I'm staying, you pay me to run this building properly. Your wage? She named it. Orrin raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious. So am I. He extended his hand. Agreed. She shook it. Neither released immediately. Something passed between them. Not romance yet. Recognition. 2 stubborn adults discovering that neither intended to be carried by the other. And neither knew that before the month ended, workers would begin arriving at Black Mesa after dark, carrying the evidence that could bring an entire company down. The first worker arrived at Black Mesa after sunset. Then another came the following night. By week's end, there were 9. They never arrived together. They were too frightened for that. Each carried something. A pay envelope. A deduction slip. A copied contract. Quill and Mar brought telegraph records showing wages approved at one amount and paid at another. Soon the stone treatment house had become something entirely different. Evidence covered the long table. Cecily sat at its center, healthier now, comparing figures while Mora organized documents by worker and date. Orrin watched from the doorway. He had originally brought 2 women here because one needed somewhere safe to recover. Now those women were building a case powerful men had spent years making sure nobody could build. One evening, Mora caught him staring. What? I was wondering when you became commander of Black Mesa. She raised an eyebrow. When you started leaving everything disorganized. He laughed. It surprised them both. Talon didn't wait quietly for disaster. He called a public meeting. By the time Orrin, Mora, and Cecily entered the town hall, nearly every seat was occupied. Talon stood confidently before the crowd. Cecily Fenwick was an unreliable employee. Murmurs spread. These accusations began only after she was disciplined. Orrin stepped forward. Cecily stopped him. No. She rose. Still recovering, but steady. If he's accusing me, I'll answer. She carried her ledger to the front. No dramatic speech followed. Just numbers. June 17th. 14 hours worked. 10 recorded. She turned a page. June 23rd. Housing deduction. I never lived in company housing. Another. July 2nd. Medical reserve. No physician was provided. Then she called Quillen. He confirmed the transmitted payroll totals. A miner stood. His envelope showed the same deduction. Then another worker stood. Then 5 more. Talon's confidence disappeared one witness at a time. Finally, Cecily looked directly at him. You depended on each worker believing he was the only one being cheated. She gestured toward the crowded hall. We've compared our records now. Silence. You should have paid us. The investigation moved quickly afterward. Territorial officials froze company accounts while records were seized. Back wages would eventually be recovered. But Orrin knew returning stolen money wouldn't solve the larger problem. At the next town meeting, he stood before nearly everyone in Sagebrush Wells. I've reopened the old treatment house at Black Mesa. People expected him to announce a private clinic. Instead, he continued. It won't belong to Black Mesa. He pledged part of his freight income to establish an independent emergency fund for adult workers injured, stranded, or temporarily unable to earn. Other ranchers could contribute. Workers could voluntarily contribute when able. Dr. Kittredge agreed to hold regular clinics. Cecily would maintain transparent accounts. Mora would administer the refuge. Someone called from the crowd. Why would you pay for strangers? Orrin looked toward Mora. Months earlier, she'd stopped his horse and begged him to save her daughter. Because nobody should have to reach desperation before somebody decides they're worth helping. For once, Sagebrush Wells had nothing to say. By autumn, Cecily was completely independent again. Then a letter arrived from Carson City. The Territorial Telegraph Service wanted her. Better salary, regular hours, her own lodging. It was everything she'd wanted. Maura read the letter twice. You'll be so far away. Cecily smiled. Mother. That single word carried 22 years of love. You spent my whole life making sure I had somewhere safe to go. She took Maura's hands. Now find somewhere you want to stay. 3 weeks later, Maura watched her daughter's stagecoach disappear beyond the hills. She cried, not because Cecily was leaving, because this time her daughter was leaving by choice. That evening, Oren found Maura outside the treatment house. You saved her, she said. No, you did. I provided transportation and an empty building. His voice softened. You taught her she was worth saving long before I knew either of you. Maura looked away before he could see her tears. What happens now? Oren stepped closer. That depends on whether you're staying. For the refuge? No. Her eyes met his. For me. Maura studied the intimidating rancher everyone in Sagebrush Wells considered incapable of tenderness. Then she smiled. That's the poorest proposal I've ever heard. Oren's face fell. She laughed. Fortunately, it's also the one I'm accepting. 1 year later, the stone building behind Black Mesa Ranch had a new sign. Black Mesa Workers' Refuge. Cecily returned from Carson City wearing a smart traveling coat and carrying improved payroll forms she'd helped develop. She found her mother happier than she'd ever known her. Maura and Oren had married quietly that spring. The refuge remained busy without becoming charity. People contributed when they could. Ranchers donated food. Workers volunteered repairs. Dr. Kittredge maintained regular hours. And every account remained open for inspection because Cecily insisted secrecy had caused enough trouble already. One evening, another freight wagon appeared. An exhausted adult woman climbed down, supporting her grown sister. She looked toward the large ranch uncertainly. I don't know if we can pay. Maura stopped. For an instant, she saw herself a year earlier, running beside a wagon, terrified, desperate enough to stop the most intimidating man in town and beg him to save her daughter. She walked down the steps. You don't have to beg here. The woman stared. Oren appeared behind Maura and opened the refuge door. Warm lamplight spilled into the evening. Cecily stood inside watching her mother welcome 2 strangers. And suddenly Maura understood what Oren had really done after she'd cried. Take my daughter. Let her live. He hadn't simply saved Cecily. He had made sure the next desperate woman wouldn't need to throw herself before a powerful man and pray that he happened to be merciful. Behind them, the door remained open. And at Black Mesa, that was exactly how they intended to keep it.